Arrowhead of the National Park Service, Little Rock Central High School, National Historic Site, Minnijean Brown Trickey.
It is November 19th, 2003. We're in the studios at UALR, and I'm conducting an oral history interview with Minnijean Brown Trickey. So we'll just go ahead and get started. Can you tell me about when and where you were born and what Little Rock was like when you were growing up?
Okay, I was born September 11th, 1941, in Little Rock. I'm sure some hospital in the segregated ward, the colored ward. What was it like when I was growing up? Well, actually, my memories are of a couple who were my babysitters. I have some really warm memories about them. And I went to just about every school in the city because we moved a lot. So I went to Bush School, which I don't, and I went to Booker T. Washington School. I went to Gibbs, I think. Yeah, so yeah, I went to 3 of the schools. Was fabulous. I was, when I was in grade 5, I was allowed to keep the grade 1s, the kids in grade 1, you know. So, you know, I would take names if they were naughty or whatever. So every once in a while there were some cool things. And I remember especially how pleased I was when my mother came to the school, because I thought she was so beautiful. I think that everybody thinks their mother's beautiful. I just thought she was so beautiful, and I just was swelled with pride when she came to school. So that means, I think, as I think of it, I know she was in the PTA. I know she had a Brownie troop. She had a Cub Scout troop. And I don't know what they're called, leaders. But so there were kids around my house. We were always doing crafts. And I remember, how much detail do you want me to go into? I'm just trying to set it. I remember that we got the used uniforms because they were cheaper, used Brownie uniforms.
And all of those activities were segregated?
Absolutely. Girl Scouts, definitely segregated. And I don't know if there was a separate office or she did her stuff with the regular office. I didn't really know enough about that. So my brother, who was 6 years younger than I was a Cub Scout. And she was the den mother, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I'm really maybe trying to set a scene of a lot of warmth and sort of maybe even development for kids. I went to Union African Methodist Episcopal Church, and apparently my mother's family, that church was founded in something like 1910, and members of her family had been in that church since its founding. It was a merging of 2 churches. So even when I was a kid, I wasn't very religious, but I certainly did like church and Sunday school and, you know, all the things like the little plays and whatever church does. That's, you know, if we're talking about young age. Then I went to Dunbar, which was fine, too. I had a well, let me just give you one little tidbit about my grade 6. I competed my heart out with Terrence Roberts because he was the smartest guy in the class, and I fully wanted to be the smartest person in the class. So I'm not sure if a girl could be the smartest, but I certainly tried. And I just remember that with such vividness. And
So tell me about going to Dunbar.
well, I think we were among we were maybe the first graduating class from Dunbar, I think, because Horace Mann was, the all-black school was, I guess, became the black high school.
Right.
What did I do at Dunbar? I always used to sing, and so if there was a choir or something, I was part of that. I didn't play an instrument, so always felt like I should have. It was fun. Junior high school was fun. We had these teas and fashion shows that were related to the clothing classes and the cooking classes. So those were kind of fun. And I remember that I was the campaign manager when I was in grade 9 for Herbert Denton, who was running for president of student body. He was in grade 8, I was in grade 9. He didn't win, of course. So I feel smiley when I talk about that. So I think that's meaningful. I don't feel any particular angst or trauma when I talk about my school and what it was like when I was a kid. A lot of bicycle riding when I was a kid. A lot of walking. You could walk downtown, walk wherever you wanted to go. It's funny about, trying to look at my life from this point and sort of, revising it based on what I know, which is kind of not fair, but also I guess you really do have to think about it from the present. I think once, when I was maybe 7 or something, there was some teasing. You're usually walking along with your stick in a fence kind of thing. I remember some white kids who were about the same age or maybe a little bigger. Nothing really happened except there was this, like tension as you pass. There was never anything of like white people are bad or so I kind of lived a life that knew they were there, but without any kind of regard or anything else for white people. So I don't know, I guess that's how you do it. I don't know how your parents do it, but, and my dad worked for white people, mostly people who had enough money to do landscaping, and he never really said anything. So, I mean, you kind of grow up in this, white people are there, just don't bother them. Maybe you don't bother them and they won't bother you. I think, okay, I'll tell you one story I think that's really important in terms of feeling, not sure what the feeling was, but going to this store, I think it was called Dixon's, which was up the street from us, down in the southern part of the city, to get something. I have no idea, but I was there and I was there and I was there. And he wouldn't wait on me. He waited on everybody. It was used by white people and black people, and I was this little girl who I think was about 7. And I kind of dragged home and met my mother. And she said, "Why were you so long?" And I was just, the feeling I feel was like I was swollen with, I was red and I was embarrassed and I was somehow ashamed, but I couldn't quite understand what happened. And I said, well, he just wouldn't wait on me. And I didn't say, I don't really remember the event. All I remember is the feeling of just being really ashamed and just feeling as if my whole body was flushing, just burning. And then my dad, when we got home, my dad said, "I'm going up there and I'm going to talk to him." And my mother said, "No, don't go. We'll just never go there again." So that's something that just came to mind, I guess. I think if I were to spend more time examining some of my things, which I'm doing, trying to write my book, more stuff will come up, but maybe not. I don't know. Because if you didn't know what was happening, if you didn't have a word for it in my young life, if I didn't have a word to describe it, then it doesn't pop up in my mind in that way. So that's where I'm having difficulty, is trying to just go with how I felt rather than try to describe what was really happening.
Right.
Are these answers too long?
No, these are fine.
Okay.
Would it be safe to say, especially from listening to that story, that from living in a segregated town when you really had very little contact with white people, that then when you did have contact with white people, it was sort of always a new adventure?
Let me think. Well, you know, the thing I think that is really interesting is the whole idea of this dual consciousness that Du Bois talks about, this whole thing of being in a society where I was so pleased when I saw that concept, because it somehow, white people were one-dimensional to me, but also very well observed so as to stay safe. So it's kind of, I guess if you're around some kind of wild animal, you're checking it to make sure it's not mad at you, or when you're walking by a dog, you're watching for signals. So I think most black kids were smart enough to just try to stay away from any kind of problems with white people. I think we can fast forward and talk about Emmett Till in, I think it was 1954, maybe. We had, but also the other part I think that's really important is this parallel life that is, there was the Black Press, there was Chicago Defender, there was Ebony, there was Jet, because Arkansas Gazette and Democrat called, yeah, we talked about stuff like that, called colored people by their first name and put colored behind. They never put white unless there was some kind of reason. So you notice it's always apparent, even when you're young. And I guess the idea, maybe, and I don't really know, is that's the way it is, and so that's the way it is. It doesn't ever feel right. It doesn't ever feel fair. It feels somehow weird. And I think, forget the Arkansas Gazette and the Democrat, because that was, seemed to me, that was their vehicle for news, and ours was the State Press and the Chicago Defender and Jet. So we were happy with our you know, we were, I don't know, content with this parallel parallel life, I guess you could call it, but saw the contempt in the regular newspaper. You know, it's there, it's there, it's there. And saw the, if not contempt, wishy-washiness about shopping. And also, I was really upset because I had big feet and all the shoes were little. And I was also fat and had to buy these Chubette dresses. And so we'll fast forward to, for instance, the magazines, the popular magazines, 17. And I could never see myself in it. I love the magazine and I wanted the fantasy life, but in some ways it was always outside me because it just was. And yeah.
Let me get a little bit more specific information on exactly where you lived and your family and your siblings.
Well, we lived in a lot of different places. Because that's why I went to these different schools.
Right.
And sometimes we lived in two places while I was at a particular school. We lived in Tuxedo Court, which was a project, but it was fabulous. I mean, when I was a kid. And one of the things about the court was people had jobs, were working, and they had their stoves and refrigerators on the porch because it was a place where you were saving to buy a house. And it was fabulous. There was just running and playing and hide and seek and catching fireflies and riding bikes around and close friendships. It was fabulous. And never, for me, any sense of danger. Because we used to play out at night until somebody made us come in. You know, that first kid whose mom called her, ruined the whole game. But it just seemed like my memories are just running and playing, and because there was a big grassy square right behind our house. Yeah, and these are the same people you go to school with, so the relationships are actually quite intimate.
How many brothers and sisters do you
I
have?
have one sister and one brother who's dead. I like that word instead of passed away. Who died a couple of years ago. He was born, I guess, whenever was 6 years after I was born, 47. And then my sister was born 49, I think. And then my youngest brother, I was 12 years older than he was, and I'm not going to try to...
53?
Yeah. I don't know how old he is or anything. I just know that I was... Yeah. And I worshipped him, and people actually said, "Is that your baby?" Because I had him with me all the time. And, yeah. Whatever.
Let's move back a little bit to Dunbar. You were there for junior high,
Yes.
but you left after ninth grade.
Right.
So you were only there for junior high. With regards to Dunbar, did you have any feelings about it in terms of what type of school it was? Good, bad, or indifferent? Did it stand out?
I think that when we're in a school, feeling comfortable and having teachers who had gone to teachers college, when my mother went to teachers college briefly, or teachers who actually taught her, or teachers she might be friends with, there's some very comfortable, very I think, satisfied. They're, you know, they had a good band, they had a football, you know, before it was junior high, all the stuff that people do about Dunbar is just a recreation of how we felt about it when we were there. I don't think there was ever any sense that any place was better. I think we thought they can, you know, they do what they do, but we do what we do.
How aware were you of 1954 and when the Brown versus Board decision was handed down?
Well, it gets talked about in your house. However briefly, it's in the newspaper. There's commentary in the black press. So there's an awareness. I mean, the idea is, if I can try to remember it, is that all this craziness is going to probably stop. Them up high, me down low kind of thing. That somehow it's going to balance out. That school seems, and because we had such good experience in schools seemed a nice, calm place for people to actually work some of that stuff out. We're young, we're kids. I didn't get a sense that my parents were afraid or were cynical or even really, yeah, I don't even remember too much what they thought about it. And that was in 1954. But the other thing I think that happened is the death of Emmett Till. And whatever the Supreme Court decision was, or whatever the world said, his death was so powerful. It was so shocking. And it just kind of like, it's like, this is who we are. This is what can happen to us. This is the level of danger we're in. And so there became an immediacy that was connected to sort of maybe the Supreme Court decision, that if we were together, we wouldn't have that kind of thing. That couldn't happen. So there was just this feeling that this was horrible, but there was a reason for it, and the reason for it was because there was all this separation, and there was, and nobody understood, and it didn't make sense, and it was insane, but this could stop, you know? And that was because he was the same age I was. I think he was 1 month, born in July, 1941. So it was very, it just did it. It did it for me. It said, oh no, I'm not going to feel this level of fear, and this is not right, and this shouldn't have happened. And it was, then it shifted from kind of dismay to no more. This is it shifted to anger. It shifted to action. It really did. I remember, I'm doing something about this. I'm not going to stand with my hands on the fence at War Memorial Park and watch them swim. There's something wrong here. I don't like it, and I'm not sure why I don't like it, but this has got to stop.
So after the Brown decision, I know there was a fairly immediate reaction at Dunbar among some of the faculty, and I guess also the students. So tell me about how you reacted to the possibility of going to Central High School, or Little Rock Senior High at that point.
Well, it didn't seem that much of a possibility. It seemed something really far off, and to me the big problem with Horseman was that it was way over there, and to me that just was, it just seemed so unreasonable. I don't think anybody actually lived out there. Maybe people did, but, and there were all these rumors about digging up a cemetery, and I mean, it just seemed like it was in a swamp or something, and so it kind of already had a creepy feeling about it from the beginning. Whether they did dig up bodies and whether it was a cemetery, I'm not sure, but it certainly, there was some sense that it did feel like it was in a swamp, and it did feel like it was in a place where nobody lived, and it did feel like it was way out there, and it just didn't make sense, but it was there. And also, when I did go there, the architecture was some kind of punishment. We kept thinking, we had to wear your coats in school. You had to wear your coats because this breezeway thing. And it just seemed so ludicrous. So for me, it always felt out of sorts. It felt, where would they build this school? California, Hawaii, Florida? It seemed too cold in Little Rock to make sense. So it just always had this, for me anyway, because I'm really attentive to detail in some very weird way, and just all the factors. I mean, when I was there, it was fine, but it still didn't make sense to sit in gym and then huddle outside to go to your next class, because I thought it was cold, But I don't know, it just seemed even when I was young, it seemed somehow not to be right to have a less than aspect to it. And I didn't, not for a second, did I have any doubts about teachers. They were fabulous. And not for me, but I know Opal Harper, who was a teacher and also went to our church. And we had a lot of teachers in our church, and that's the only thing black women could do then anyway. So there were a lot of black teachers. And Opal Harper set up what it was kind of the first gifted program and that I know about. And my brother and her son and a couple of other young people were in that. Because she told my mother, my brother's name was Willie Bobby, her son's name was Willie David. She said, Willie Bobby and Willie D are bored to tears. So I'm going to set up this thing. And so it's very personal, I think. You know, it's not a farm community, but it's very personal, the relationship.
So were you told at Horace Mann by administrators about the opportunity to go to Central?
You know, I don't think anybody ever explained it. I certainly don't remember. I'm trying to find that space in my little computer here, but it's not coming up. The first, you know, I heard, you know, the board, and you kind of, you know, my mother reads the newspaper from cover to cover still. My father read the newspaper. And it's in part, when I'm analyzing it, they thought, and yes, they did read the Arkansas Gazette. They didn't read the Democrat. They absolutely only read the Gazette. So there's, you know, they see the plan, they read about it. They read those papers religiously. She still does, and that's fine. She thinks I'm a real slacker because I don't read the newspaper. I do, but I won't let her see me do it. But, so they were, as much as you can get from the newspaper, they were up on what was going on. But I wasn't particularly, and I don't think, does anybody else remember a meeting or anything? I don't.
So
what does Melba say?
I don't know what Melba says.
Okay,
I'll have to
I
ask
think
her.
what happened is the way I've told it before. Probably it was in the news that it's going to happen because of the plan, but the main way I heard about it was on the intercom. Anybody who wants to go to Central, sign a sheet of paper and give it to your homeroom teacher. And in that room, that group, Thelma Mothershed, is Miss Frider's homeroom, grade 10. If my memory serves me, it was Melba Patillo, Thelma Mothershed, Minnijean Brown, and Elizabeth Eckford who signed that. Those are the people I remember who signed it. I don't know who else did.
Up until that point, sort of up to 1957, let's say, was your family a member of or active in the NAACP?
I haven't a clue, and the reason I don't have a clue is because there's so much has been said about the NAACP, lack thereof, who was an activist, and all that stuff that I can't have my own memories. My mom, I don't know what she would say. I mean, the whole idea, member, is a little ludicrous because it's really more not about the card, but more about participating in activities. It's more about supporting in some way. It's more about, I know my mom used to sell poll tags when I was a kid, and I used to go with her. And I know that she poll watched, and I know that because she was friends with I.S. McClinton. I don't know if you know these people, but, and her best friend for her young life were the Ware sisters, so it always very intimate. So political, yes. I mean, yeah, selling poll tax is really not that political, but voting and being out there and talking to people about voting and seeing voting as a real personal responsibility. Talking about candidates, the big argument I used to have with my family was, you're really going to vote for Eisenhower? Because I wanted Adlai Stevenson, and I actually had heated arguments with them about my preference for Adlai Stevenson. So there was political talk in the House somehow, whether they were card-carrying members of the NAACP, I doubt it. I don't know.
Prior to 57, do you remember anything about Daisy Bates?
I think I do, and I think I don't. It's very interesting because in part of this development of these young black kids to become, you know, whatever. We had at the Dunbar Community Center, Miss Pierce, who was the kind of director. See, I don't know the dates, that's why I'm doing research on this stuff. We had a charm class taught by, I don't know who, but a white woman came and taught us charm. And Joyce McClinton, who was the daughter of IS and Mrs. McClinton, who had won some kind of beauty contest, also taught us charm, because she had won a black beauty contest. We had dance classes. Somebody from Arthur Murray came and taught us the cha-cha and some ballroom dancing. We had the Colored Women's Federated Junior Clubs, and the Poindexter sisters were really instrumental in that. Sylvia and Dolores, who's deceased now. What else? Well, we had the Brownies, Girl Scouts. And I think we actually probably went to, I've got a picture that's got some kids in it, not the Little Rock Nine per se, but a group of kids. And if I'm looking at Dolores Poindexter, she looks to be about 13. And Thelma looks to be. So I think we had a junior something or other in AACP, something like that. I'm not, it all kind of runs together, but, you know, I'd have to talk to somebody else about that. But that's what I think I remember. But it wasn't, it was more about, you know, how you develop into a thinking young person.
Absolutely. Well-rounded.
Yeah.
Well,
So it wasn't about racist, you know, I want to make that clear, that there was so much invested in making us, helping us to be thoughtful, well-rounded young people. That, I think, is what I see. Maybe for some kids, there's a lot invested in helping to be, but I feel like there was a lot invested in making us all. And of course, there were some of us who were, Jefferson Thomas's family, I want to talk, he had older brothers and sisters, and they could dance, and they were great at that. We used to go to Phyllis Wheatley, colored YWCA, to these socials. Usually, Thelma went with me, and I was kind of her friend, and because she had the heart condition, we'd walk, and then she would, I shouldn't, you know, she can tell you this, but she would get down on her, just squat down, because, and she explained that she did that way because that's what she did when she was a kid, when she was sick. And Thelma actually did turn blue. So we could walk a certain distance, and then she would squat down, and then walk a certain more distance. Or we could dance a certain amount of time, and then she would stop. And so, I mean, also, Thelma had older sisters, and they were just, we worshiped them, okay? We worshiped them. Especially Lois, who was so talented and beautiful, and Grace, who went to the coronation in 1954. So there were our role models. I wanted to be just like Grace Mothershed. I wanted to be just like Lois. I wanted to be just like Joyce McClinton. I wanted to be just like Grace Helen Hayes. So we had these fabulous young women role models who we were fascinated by. I know this is not what you're asking, but I really.
But that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, that's how it, yeah, I'm actually
Possibly
trying.
not.
That's why I didn't read the questions, because I really want it to come as it is.
Sure.
I didn't want to study or think or try to shape. I just really wanted it to bubble out.
Leading up to the 1957 school year, you mentioned signing up on a piece of paper. Do you remember doing things after that, maybe filling out a questionnaire for the school district, getting help from the district in terms of getting ready to go to Central, or just sort of out there?
Well, I've tried to remember that, and I've asked my mother. I think you'd have to get it from her. I think 15, we're just so self-absorbed that you all can do whatever you all want and just keep on going, but we are absorbed with ourselves. And I really don't remember any of the meetings. I don't, I can't, I will at some point. I did run into a book in the New York City Library that was a master's thesis on the testing that was done to qualify the Little Rock 9. And it was, you know, like a little thick book. And I said, I'll come back to get it another time. And I never found it again. It was in, when I was living in New York. I was 18, I think. And I haven't really gone on a concerted search for that. So I don't know. I really don't remember. I think I remember something about, and that's the problem with having other people tell their stories, is that it gets confused. And so the Ernest Green story has the thing about them saying that we couldn't participate in any extracurricular activities. Maybe I remember that, maybe I don't.
So possibly with little or no preparation, you get to go to Central High School in September of 1957. How did you first find out about Governor Falbus calling out the Arkansas National Guard?
Well, I have to tell you something beforehand, and that is maybe we got a letter, I haven't looked through my mother's stuff, saying that we were to go to Central, but I do know our names were in the newspaper and our addresses.
Great.
Before. It's somewhere, sometime during the summer.
And was that the 9 of you, or were there
There were actually,
other...
like Jane Hill was with us
Right.
on the first day, and Dolores Poindexter said she was accepted, but her mother wouldn't let her go. Well, just about everybody in Little Rock says they were accepted, but I know that's not true, so. But, or that they were going. And that's okay. I mean, that's fine. So we had no sense of who said, I didn't, who was going and who could go until kind of the first day.
Okay.
And, you know, the governor made that announcement on Labor Day. You'll have to talk to my mother. But it didn't mean anything. It really didn't. It was like, what? What is he doing? That dopey looking big-eared thing, like with that accent. You know, you kind of felt that sort of animosity toward him when he made that announcement, but weren't sure why. And also, we knew that he had been opposing and everybody, and Jim Johnson, all these people walking around rabble-rousing and having these mass meetings. Yeah, that was all clear. And that, in part, you know, that summer, before all that strengthened my resolve. I thought, whoa, you guys just keep on clowning. I'm going. Because they were saying horrible things.
Absolutely. When he made the address, did you get a sense of that this could be dangerous?
No, no, because it felt to me, you know, you live in this society, you know how people talk, all these codes they use, you know, they're not going over your head. You can hear them even when you're a kid. I can hear them now, you know, various people, codes. And that code was, I'm warning you, there's going to be trouble. That was what it felt like. I think I remember being really indignant, saying, what is wrong with you? You know, you idiot, you stupid man. What is, you know, so I mean, but it felt very coded, and it felt kind of like, well, those people are going to cause trouble. You know, that was what I thought he was saying. I certainly didn't think that he, I mean, which now when we analyze it, he knew that the mob was going to be there. But to me, he gave the speech as if, you know, bad black boys are going to cause trouble, and, you know, that it's going to be, and that's how it felt to me, that it was going to be somehow, there were going to be fights, or we were going to attack them, or we were vicious, mean, rotten, gross people who were going to attack innocent, sweet, lily white people. So I was furious about it. And I didn't feel, yeah, and I do remember, it just felt so coded, and it just felt like he wasn't talking to me. And that was what I felt more than anything else, that he really wasn't talking to us.
That's interesting.
Because he had never been talking to us before. He had talked all this rhetoric about,
Absolutely.
and everybody was screaming all this stuff. So, and it was all coded and sometimes really overt. So it was just part of the dialogue. It was part of the discourse that was going on, you know. So he wasn't, you know, just very much like I feel that nobody's talking to me now, with all these codes about the stuff that people are saying. It's the same kind of detachment and the same kind of isolation that I felt then. And I actually made note of that to myself recently. This is what it felt like. I'm not a part of this. This has nothing to do with me.
That's interesting. Do you remember, and could you describe that first attempt to go inside the high school?
And that gets really confusing. You have to, you know, I think you have to take this and ask my mother, and it has to, I think it's a really important question to ask her, and ask her in as much detail. But my memory has it that my minister, ZZ Driver, I don't know if he came to our house or called or something, and said, I'm going with her. And now I don't know really what happened. My mom says she took me to a designated spot, and Harry Bass, ZZ Driver, a white guy, and maybe Reverend Young, I don't know. If he's in the picture, he was there. If he says he was there, he was there. But the other 500 people, ministers, who say they were there, weren't. And we walked toward the school. Your next question is about Daisy Bates, and I can't answer that because
Well, it wasn't going to be my next question, but yeah, I would have gotten there.
yeah, I
Well,
in the
actually,
picture.
let me flip that.
Okay.
Instead of Daisy Bates, can you tell me about Elsie Bates that day?
So it seems to me we walked with the preachers, okay? Some of us, the picture. I don't know who took that footage, but we didn't, it wasn't made up. And walked over to the corner, you know, right across from the filling station. And I don't see Daisy Bates in those pictures. And I have asked Chris Mercer, and I'll have to get more detail. I don't remember her being there. I remember Jane Hill being there.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I mean, really, I was just so overwhelmed by it that
Sure.
and I'm so fascinated by the photographs because we're all just looking so bewildered, and I think that's a good description. I mean, just absolutely bewildered. And that's the main feeling that I feel. Shaky, very, very nervous, just shaky, shaky, shaky. And you know, you're kind of standing and your whole body is shaking. And you're trying to be cool. You know what? You're 15, cool over anything. But shaky, and it even actually makes me shaky now.
I'm sure.
But I know Reverend Todd.
Interim period between that day and September 25th. Do you remember how you spent that time?
Yeah, we spent the time actually. We went to Philander, I think, to get some help. Then we started, I think. Yeah. Then to me, then Daisy's house. Okay, because Thurgood had to come. I know he's Justice Thurgood Marshall, but we just called him Thurgood. And Thurgood was coming, and then there were these other lawyers. There was laws. There were people, and we were getting letters and calls, and James. See, I don't remember when James Lawson taught us the nonviolence. I don't know all the people who were coming through, but we were an item, and everybody wanted to see us or look at us or touch us and so that was kind of fun. It was really heady, and there were lots of television interviews, and all the guys who were beginning, John Chancellor, Dan all the guys who are like old now were young then, and I got interviewed by Walter Cronkite quite a lot later, but not during that period. So we were getting these letters. People were wanting to see us. We had to go to court. Judge Davies and Thurgood went with us, and Chris and Wiley. And it's so funny because actually we did call them by their names. And nobody ever said, boys and girls, this is a big deal. We were just, it was, I mean, nobody ever said, you know, there was never any like lecture or preaching or anything. They just made us, we were just peers suddenly in the struggle. I think that's the most fabulous feeling I ever had. We were like with these lawyers and Daisy and Elsie and all that, but we were peers because it was just fabulous.
Would you, during that time and after you got into Central, describe Mrs. Bates as a mentor?
Well, okay, she had to get, we called her Miss Bates, Mr. Bates. Actually, I liked him better. Of course she was a mentor because she has to call the big boys. She had to call the inmates. She had to report to Roy Wilkins. She had to tell them what the situation was. You know, they couldn't just get it from the newspapers. So obviously, her role was the president of NAACP and all those actions and activities that are related to being the president of the NAACP. But in fact, I think at a certain point, because of the seriousness of Little Rock, I mean, they probably, you know, it started being run from the national office with as much running from the Little Rock office, but the real thing having to be done in the national office. Am I answering questions too long?
No.
Because this is for me too,
Yeah,
because.
it's fine.
Oh, okay.
Let's talk about going into Central on September 25th, 1957, with your escorts from the United States Army.
Well, by the time we, you know, we went on that second day, and that was pretty scary. I don't know what date it was when we went with the police.
The Friday before, yeah.
And the freakiest, freaky, I don't want to use that word, could you scratch that? The weirdest thing about that was they were scared, and we knew it. So that didn't feel, you know, I didn't even think of them as being just white guys. I thought of them as being scared white guys.
The Army?
The police.
Oh, the police, okay.
And the thing is that if the police are scared, I should be scared. And so that was the scariest day, I think, the second day when we went in, because their hands were shaking and their knuckles were white and they were like scared. And that was the only time when I realized I should be scared too. Yeah, the people are yelling and they're doing all that, but had I ever seen a mob before? No. So how do I know how to react to a mob? I don't know what they can do. I didn't understand the concept mob. I just thought they were a bunch of crazy people yelling. I had no sense that, I had no rehearsal. I had no script in my head for a mob. I didn't really know that much about lynching. We didn't see them kicking the reporters. They felt ominous, but when I saw how scared the police were, I said, what am I doing? These guys are petrified. So I think that was the scariest day for me. Just because of their fear. I mean, my kids say to me now, when you're nervous, we get nervous. And that was, there was just this total nervousness, this total kind of fear. So that was scary. So that was my scariest day. By the time we went on the 25th, you know, we'd done lots of interviews. We'd done interviews for, I had a story in a Norwegian newspaper that took 2 full pages and all kinds of pictures, and it was sent to me with a translation, and we were accustomed and sort of, we learned really quickly in a new situation that, yeah, you know what, we're pretty important here. And because there was so much media coverage, even though we knew the people were crazy, we also knew that they would have to be really crazy to kill one of us in public. I thought maybe I'd get killed on the day we went with the police. But, so by the time we went on the 25th, we had learned lots that the world indeed was watching. We had the unlike media today, it appeared that the world media took a moral stand on Little Rock. And they were horrified. They were, I thought it was really fair the way they did it. They showed the pictures. And all they did was show the pictures. Well, they spoke enough, right? In fact, who needs to comment when you see that? Mm-hmm. But by that time, we started to recognize our importance. Thurgood had explained before we went to court about it being a constitutional conflict and what his argument was going to be and how, you know, states' rights. And so at 16, I had a really good understanding of stuff that lasted me, you know, that still has meaning for me and helps me interpret. So we're really fortunate that he and Chris Mercer and Wiley Brandon and all these people thought it important enough to explain it to us.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember hearing President Eisenhower's speech on the television?
Yeah, we were watching it, and that was pretty cool, you know, yeah. But again, who knows? Can you trust these guys? You know, he's been negotiating. They're the same kind of guys. They're both politicians. Is this really going to happen? Is this to protect me? And so not really trusting even the president, feeling some level of elation, but still saying, you know, well, what does this mean? Because I don't trust any of these guys now after what I've seen. You know, I just became this total cynic in 3 weeks, 2 weeks or whatever. So yeah, what are these guys going to do now?
So the 25th was better?
The 25th was great because the 101st treated, they helped to open the door, ma'am. It was like, and we'd never been treated like that, first of all, by anybody, and certainly not by any white people, with all this respect. And so it's pretty fairy tale-ish. It was pretty exciting just to be treated in this way and to be treated with such respect. I mean, I know that's military stuff. Having the doors open for us and having all, you know, I'm a nonviolent pacifist, but I sure did like all that hardware they had because I thought it would be you know, I hadn't seen the full assembly. I hadn't seen what they had at the school because, you know, we weren't allowed around there. Mm-hmm. And we didn't go out too much. But it just felt like they're really going to protect us. They're serious, and they've got what it takes to do so. So I just felt so happy. And I just felt, I think we all just felt happy. And we're always kidding around, and I know we're kidding around in the Jeep, and because we felt free to kid around. Mm-hmm. That was the first time we actually felt free to be ourselves, and we were like giggling and making jokes, and yeah, it was a really good feeling.
Did that feeling change when you got inside the school and during that school year?
The main,
It's okay.
I think the main feeling that I felt in that school was nobody liked me. And I have never not been liked. And it just was, I was just, I can't, it's so,
very hard?
I don't know when you get over it. I don't know.
I don't think you do get over it. So, okay.
I don't know when it. I don't know when it stops hurting. I think that's the way. I'm going to be okay. I think I don't know. And I can't describe it because I don't have a way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a way to describe it because somebody didn't do it before we did and come out and describe it and tell us what it was, how we were supposed to feel.
Sure.
So I can't actually identify those feelings except hurt and kind of sadness. So that's all I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, maybe it doesn't matter if somebody is kicking you down the steps or not. Maybe that's not the worst thing that can happen. Maybe the worst thing that can happen is to feel so unwelcome and to have, you know, like Miss Huckabee was scared to death of me. She just was like so nervous around me, and, you know, to feel like I didn't have a warm protector. And there was no protector in that school. She was as close to it as it got. So, I mean, just to feel, my guard was my protector, but then he had to go.
Mm-hmm.
But to just feel just so vulnerable that if somebody just changed their minds right then and there and decided, let all hell break loose, there would be nobody to take care of me, and there would be no one who cared enough about me to keep me safe somehow. And that, I think, was just the feeling of total vulnerability all the time. That, I think, was such a strain of just, you know, keeping that smile and walking through the halls and keeping my head up and feeling very, very, very at risk. And that, I think, is mostly, I just felt that I just didn't have anybody who would help me or could help me after the soldiers left.
Mm-hmm. So with regard to your classmates, is any interaction, little interaction?
In Glee Club, I had this teacher who was nervous about me being there, but she just said to herself, and by some manner, maybe she called everybody at night or something. That's where I felt safe. It was all girls. And if anybody wanted to snicker, you know, girls do this thing where they're always sort of snickering and, you know, like making you feel like a toad or whatever. But in that class, it sort of wasn't tolerated, or they didn't want to do it or something. And one of my favorite photographs is by Will Counts, is I'm standing outside at the bomb threat, and those are the girls who were in my Glee Club class. So that was, I wanted to be there badly. But I think it was the teacher. She just tried to make it as normal as possible. I mean, her hands were shaking. It must have been really hard for her, but somehow she pulled it off.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing about me that was in any way strange. And I think that's probably what we all really want in our lives, is somehow not to feel weird, just to feel sameness somehow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have, I think, become famous for a few things at Central High School. One of which is your desire to be singing and participate in activities like that. The second of which that is probably the more famous is the chili incident.
Okay. Well,
And my first question about the chili incident, before you recount it if you want to, is, in your mind's eye, taking into consideration sort of the entire year, how important is that?
how important is it for me, or how is it important for the event? How is it important for the school? How is it important
For you.
For me, it was it was kind of the, okay, I want to talk about the Glee Club thing too.
Okay.
I think at a certain point, there you have to resist. That personally, a person must resist. And I didn't know the name for it. I didn't really understand it. I mean, it took me about 30 years to find the concept site of resistance. And since one cannot speak on one's own behalf, since we were silenced in the school, we were trying to be good, and we were like being very, sweet and good, and trying to be as good enough for white people to think that we were intellectually equal to them, and that we must be so good, and we must never make mistakes, and we just absolutely and the Glee Club thing was purely my own, like, mischievousness. If you think I was going to go and try to sing in front of all those Christians, and that's what I told my mother. I said I wouldn't dare go in front of all those Christians at Christmas time to sing. But they must know that I am a person, I think, and I have feelings, and I think this is the ideal place to play it. Mm-hmm. We're talking about Christmas here. We're talking about Christ. We're talking about all those things that everybody claims to be. I guess I had this weirdness about me forever. This play kind of thing. This. So yes, it was a site of resistance. And I kind of got my mom to go along with it. But I'm serious, I would not have considered standing. It took me 45 years to get on that Central High stage, and I think that was almost too soon. That's how brutal it was there. So I wouldn't think. So I think I'm worse than people even think I am, in that I do have this streak of resistance, and that was how I manifested that, and that was about the Christmas program. As for the chili, it's, I wish it hadn't happened. But in a way, I'm glad it happened. I think it brought attention back to what was happening in the school. I think everybody had said, oh yeah, everything's fine now. All the reporters went home. And I'm analyzing it from this point back. And I felt so ashamed, and I was so devastated and horrible, and felt, that I was just horrible and that I'd done something. And much too much was made of it, this even punishment, and she's got to be punished for this, even though, and that we have to be fair. Oh, suddenly we're fair in this school? Oh, we're going to be fair this time. We're going to suspend her, and we're going to suspend them. We're going to be fair. Well, who was fair about all the bruises that were on my legs, and who was fair about all the spit, and who was fair about all that other stuff that wasn't seen, and who was fair about the stuff that we didn't even bother telling them because we knew there was no consideration for our word. And so I didn't read Miss Huckabee's book. I saw her movie, And in order for me to sign the release, I told her I wouldn't, and she said, I can't have the movie without you in it. And I said, I have to have final agreement on the script. So they sent me the script, and I read it, and they had me this like tough, like criminal, like whatever kind of, what is a tough girl in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957? This kind of, and I said, I don't like this. I said, that's not fair. You know, you have, you know, it's partly I was getting upset. You know, I was explaining this whole thing of how they were trying to help us make sure we had experiences and that we knew about things. And Joyce McClendon used to do marimba concerts. And at Horseman, our music teacher, we did the Messiah, and I wanted to be an opera singer. And, you know, I mean, this is supposed to be like not exactly a gang girl, right?
Right.
And the framing of me as a tough girl actually was the most powerful indicator of white people not having an idea of black life and what it was about, and that I had an intellect, and that I had creativity, and that I thought deeply, and I read broadly since I was a little kid. And how dare she frame me as some kind of semi-illiterate, you know, and I'd passed all their stupid tests. So I said, I won't sign it with this person. And, you know, plus, this is 1984. I said, I've been feeling guilty. I never told my kids about Little Rock. I don't tell anybody because I'm so ashamed of being expelled. And she says, well, Minnijean, didn't you know that it was for your own protection? Minnijean, you were going to be killed. I said, well, gee whiz, how long did it take somebody to tell me about that? And that whole patronizing, you don't have the brains, your mother isn't capable, your family doesn't know what kind of danger you're in. To keep that from my family, to keep that from me, is the, you know, more than the individual acts against the names, the kicking. That's the racism that is damaging, that destroys, that diminishes, and that pisses me off, okay?
Rightfully so. How do you feel now? Do you understand now that people see you as a champion of civil rights because of that?
Yes, I think that I've been in all these audiences, I had all these audiences in a few places in the world. And when they hear about the chili, the kids jump up and start screaming because it is about everybody's inherent resistance to stuff that's intolerable. Everybody has a basic sort of belief in their humanity and their right to be considered good and important and smart. And so it really does, and this is black, white, Asian, Hispanic, American, Indian, Canadian, Irish people, Irish kids, Catholics, so it is absolutely meaningful to them because in fact, you are supposed to be good and you are supposed to be nonviolent, but you're also supposed to be human. And I think that's what kids respond to because they think, I've made some mistakes in my life. I've done some stuff I regret. And I can say to them, I regret that it happened. And they forgive me and it's okay, but they're kind of glad for me that it happened.
It's an important example. Just to go off on a tangent slightly about that, how would you compare that experience and sort of how it has played out over time with someone like Rosa Parks?
How would I? Well, there's only one word. We were children. And that, I think, is the key. It's the most important aspect of this is why I'm so furious that it's not embedded in the curriculum in Little Rock, that it isn't part of the U.S. required curriculum, because it's so important to show teenagers, look, you can think, look, you're capable, look. And so we all, I think, especially Elizabeth and I, have heard more from her, and we've spoken together. Our most important point is we were teenagers and we weren't special, but everybody has this, that when you are called upon to respond to an intolerable situation, just wait, because you already have it. And you know, the question the woman asked me about a leader, people always say, will you be a leader? And leaders follow followers. I mean, and followers lead leaders. And I think that was the situation for us as the Little Rock Nine. We actually led the country to a different place, and we provided role models for kids. I've had so many people from Soweto, from Sharpeville. I've had so many South African people come and say, it was because of you that you were our models. We saw you and we thought we could do it too. And yeah, so that's the thing about Little Rock that I think is important, is that we were kids, and it doesn't matter about courts and mobs and governors and presidents and all that. Yeah, I mean, that's the stuff, the official stuff that we talk about, the part that goes in the history book, but in truth, the real value of Little Rock desegregation crisis happened to be the kids. And so do we compare ourselves to Rosa Parks? Well, yes, we do. But the sacrifice, and again, I mean, we got to be really careful. I love Rosa Parks, think she's fabulous and admire her, and she was one of my role models. But we got to remember the people who were walking for a year. And that's who we think about, and that's who we need to talk about when we talk about the bus boycott. Yeah, Rosa Parks, yes, but the people who act after, you know, the press goes away, after the flash bulbs stop popping. We talk about the people who walked, because they're a part of it too. So the concept of leadership is a patriarchal sort of top-down model, and it disservices all of us who think other ways. It disservices sometimes women in the way we think. It disservices collectivity. It disservices grassroots. It is a real smoke screen. It stops us from organizing. And so, those are the kinds of things I think about a lot.
Sort of on that theme of leadership, after the Chile incident, et cetera, you ended up being expelled from Central, and you went to New York to finish your high school education. Tell me about that. Was that about that you being a leader or an example that school board didn't want to have around? Was it about your personal safety?
I have no idea. All I know is they lied on the expulsion notice. And I have this, which I think is telling. I think that, to me, puts it all together, okay? But no more, no less than we expected, or no more, no less than they did all the time anyway. I remember Miss Bates saying, you just can't have any more incidents. We have a report that you did this, and you did that, and you did this. So, boy, I'd really have to be busy to do all this stuff. And I'd also have to be really stupid. So again, when the description is of me or anybody, me mostly, doing things, it assumes my inherent stupidity. And that again is a typical demonstration of racism at its deepest. That I'm so stupid. I've got all these people watching me, all these guards. Everybody's eye is on me. And I'm doing things, I'm calling people names. Am I so stupid that I would go up against like 1,950 people? So to me, those are the telling aspects of that experience, that in describing me, the deep racist stuff is so clear, you know, that I'm so stupid, and that I was so stupid, that I would do the things that I was accused of doing. Somebody said, and it was in the newspaper because my daughter showed it to me, and that Minnijean walked up to this white guy and said, "Get out of my way, white boy." Oh yeah, right, I'm really a dummy. So there were all these reports that I did all this stuff, so. But that to me demonstrates the racism, more than the kicking, more than the pushing down the steps, more than the name calling, more than the threats, it's that kind of thing, that white supremacy kind of thing. She's so stupid, her brain is so small that she's stupid enough to do these kinds of things in full view. How would that make anybody, I mean, so that's the stuff that made me mad. And to lie, my expulsion notice is in the Library of Congress. It is a permanent record. It's a permanent record that is a lie made by the Little Rock School Board. So how do I feel? I feel angry. I mean, it just, but it's how it, that's that they could lie on the expulsion notice and get away with it. I mean, I was so glad to leave. I mean, you know, I hated leaving my friends, but at a certain point, I didn't have any more fight left. And I don't think my mother had any, I don't think my parents had any more fight left. So, we just, you know, bye. But I really hated leaving my friends.
Tough, especially in high school. I'm going to wrap this up with just two more questions. The first is, how did the school crisis and your experiences leave you feeling about people of the opposite race, white people in particular?
Well, the big problem for that is that immediately after leaving this nightmare, this horror story, I went to a school. Okay. There was a scholarship given to me at the New Lincoln School. It's a private progressive school. I was in the 11th grade. It's so funny. But I was immature because I was from Little Rock and I was a Southern girl, and so I actually hung with grade 10 kids, rather than grade 11, because they were all sophisticated and New Yorky. But I was still giggly, and so my friends were in grade 10. And I had some fabulous friends who loved me immediately. And so, in a way, they covered over some of that other stuff. And I also had people who, I mean, I couldn't speak French for beans, even though I did have it at Central. And our French teacher was Belgian, and she actually spoke French. And I didn't do math very well, but I had a teacher who told me I was a very talented writer. and we wrote our own musical. Great musical, and I had a really big part in it. And God, it was like, oh my God. Just so, all your hatred, all of it, it just got vaporized. And they weren't doing me a favor because so I'll explain how I feel. Is they were Harry Belafonte's daughters went there, Lena Horne's daughters had gone there, Andrew Geller, Manischewitz, Wine, I mean, Rich, they weren't wowed by any kind of like celebrity or anything. In fact, I think the school was developed to protect rich kids or, Bridges. I think his name was Harry Bridges. I think he was a union activist. We never talked about who people's parents were, and or who they were. I think Brandon DeWilde, who was a child star. So there was just this. The secretary was a sister to a movie star and all kinds of stuff. And my grade 12 teacher who taught economics became ambassador to Ghana, and right. So who cares? This Minnijean Brown from Arkansas, which was what I needed. And the whole idea that for the first time, I felt like they liked me for me, which was a really good feeling, that I was just fine. So so if I had any animosity toward white people, it went out the window. I don't have animosity toward white people. I have animosity toward racist people and mean people and evil people and violent people. And that's where I'm angry about. I'm not angry about skin color. I'm angry about using power in a way. And so maybe that's what Central taught me, that I didn't in fact, thinking about them, and Marianne Rath, who would walk with me. So you've got somebody who's nice, and you've got all these other people who aren't. So it's not the skin color. Because it wasn't my skin color that made me intellectually inferior, made me the tough girl, made me go and say, white boy, get out of my way, or any of those things that they said I did. I knew that it wasn't my skin color.
With regard to the school crisis and everything, what are your thoughts about the NAACP and Daisy Bates? I think specifically sort of how this has played out over time.
Well, I think if I don't write my book and tell my own story, it'll get to be somebody else's story. And I think I'll say this, and I'll say it publicly, and it can go in the archives. I think Daisy did a really good job, considering it was new to her too. I'm not sure how many other desegregation crises there had been in the United States where federal troops were required.
At that time, none.
Okay, so not a single person involved had a clue how to do this. And so I think she did what she knew how. I'll tell you with honesty, because I think this is really important. I think we had very articulate, concerned parents who never got to speak. And I think that's the tragedy. So we have these parents who are one-dimensional. And that's too bad, because they had very powerful thoughts about it. They could give insight, that it would have been important for them to have a voice. And I don't know where the orders came from that they couldn't speak, but in some way they didn't speak. And I think a great lesson was missed, a great opportunity, and I'll tell you why, because I went to Northern Ireland where there was a Protestant Catholic conflict. Some little girls were harassed because they had to go through a Protestant section, and I'm not taking sides on that. I would never pretend to do so. But a person took me to the community center where all the parents were of these little girls, and they were something like 5 to 10. And I know this is not in this story, but I think it's a really important story. And the parents had little sandwiches for me and tea, and they were like working class people. And they were just so sweet, and they just kept asking me questions. What are we supposed to tell our kids? How do we explain it? Should I be mad? Can I, how am I supposed to feel? And I said, gee, this is what I think. And we don't know what's happening to our girls. We don't know. And so I also went later, went to the school where the girls were, and the principal told me all this and showed me around, and she says, we've got about 50 of the girls, so they're practicing the Christmas carols for the President of Ireland. You go in there and see just go and say hi. And she took me in and introduced me. And she says, well, you can ask her a question if you want to, a question or two. They had to drag me out of the room. These little girls were asking me, were you afraid at your home? Did you think they were going to kill you? Why do they hate us? We can. And, it would have been nice if somebody could come along and tell us how we were supposed to feel. So I felt that was maybe one of the most important things that's ever happened to me, is to have these girls knew I was an expert, and they knew what to ask me. And their parents were enlightened, and the social workers were working with them. And the principal said to me, we didn't have a clue what to do with them. Now we know what's bothering them. So I'm saying that because the parents could have been, when other desegregation crises came along. I mean, NAACP is an organization. They're good guys, but hey.
Right.
Where's the direct stuff that could have happened,
Absolutely.
I'm
curious about your thoughts on the students who were at Central, especially the white students who were not happy that you were there. Part of the reason I'm asking is that, as you know, some of these folks have sort of made an attempt to rewrite their role in history, and I'd like to hear your feelings and thoughts about that.
Well, I think one of the things that's kind of weird, or that I kind of want to talk about, white supremacy, you're very much protected in that, right? That's a real good thing, to protect a dominating group. And I know who was nice to me. Elizabeth knows who was nice to her, and everybody knows. Now, maybe Carlotta and Jeff had a different experience after the schools were closed for a year. And I think I like Elie Wiesel's analysis about silent witnesses. I'll tell you, If you just don't say anything, you're part of the problem and not part of the solution. So the other part, I mean, you know, like if all the other teenagers were like the Little Rock Nine, they could have changed that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to look at a society or a leadership that disempowers the very people who are affected by a given situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I wished every day that those white kids had as much guts as we had to say, this is my school, I don't like this, I won't tolerate this, I want this to change. Instead, what we hear them saying is, the Little Rock Nine ruined their year. Well, sorry folks, maybe it was your mom and dad out there screaming obscenities who messed up your year. It certainly wasn't us. So the other thing is that it is a perfect example of people standing by silently and not doing anything in their own interest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they have to think about. If they cannot forgive themselves, because if they were half as courageous as we were, if they were a tenth as courageous as we were, it would have changed. So that's my challenge. You didn't do anything. You were chicken, you were scared, and you bought that patriarchal white supremacist garbage that you were handed. You didn't think, boys and girls.
Mm-hmm. If you had to say ultimately what the school crisis was about?
Well, again, it really wasn't about us, and it really wasn't about the white kids, and it wasn't about the black kids. It was about the governor getting reelected, and it was about greed, political. Pretty much about the same as most things are. About political greed, about elections. It's about power. And in the end, it's like war, where the big guys are telling everybody what to do, but the people who suffer the most are the children. And so, yeah, it's about having it's about not valuing life, and it's about valuing power over life, and it's about valuing power over others more than life, and power over others more than peace. And that's what it's about. And so, in fact, the kids, white and black, got to be pawns in a power game, which I doubt if people in Little Rock can ever, like, I don't think that that's the way it's considered. But don't people in Little Rock feel really bad that they were manipulated like that by Jim Johnson and Orville Faubus and Ross Barnett and all those people who closed the schools across the South, and no kids went to school, white nor black or others? I mean, if we look back on that, it's a shameful time in history. It should be. If it's not, it should be. And it is partly because we don't see it as a shameful time that we're still doing the same thing in this place and in many other places across the country. We never learned anything. We didn't learn about it. We didn't learn the real issues. We didn't learn who got hurt in the end. And so we'll just keep doing it again.
Mm-hmm. On Friday, somebody asked you about whether the crisis and other sort of racist activities was about fear. And you said it wasn't about fear, that it was about power.
Yes.
Does fear factor in?
Fear factor into power? Well, yeah, if you see people who have power, how many guards they have around them, it certainly must factor in. But I think they're guarding themselves from people who are the same as they are, who want that power. I can't imagine that people could be afraid of 9 kids, 14, 15, and 16 years old. I can't imagine that they should be afraid of us, that we could harm them in any way. This color doesn't come off, and sorry, folks. So, I mean, it really is about a thought thing. It is about thinking, and it's about being intelligent, and it's about being creative. And I think resegregating of schools is a failure of the intellect, failure of the creative. It's a failure. It's a social failure. And it just means we don't think very hard, and we don't think very deep, and we don't care very much about our own kids or anybody else's. That's my opinion.
So, especially with the resegregation of the schools, is there a legacy of Little Rock in 57?
You mean here?
Well, anywhere.
Well, I got asked about a legacy of Brown v. Board, and I said if we had implemented Brown v. Board like we did Plessy, we would have been into something by now, right? Because we would have moved right into it and done all the right stuff to actually implement it. And if we had given it a portion of the implementation that we gave Plessy, we'd be fine. So we never did implement it, never did. We never took it seriously or put any, yeah, I know that people had plans and all that, but it was with the fingers crossed behind the back. This might go away. And that, I think, is, again, we didn't educate people. You know, I was taking a course in racism, and nobody in the course knew what racism was. It's like somebody calling you a name. Sorry, no. It's, you know, it's bigger than that. It's more important than that. And it's about all the other isms. It keeps us divided, conquered, helpless, hopeless, powerless, and docile. And then we can, whoever wants to do, can do just about anything.
What's the most important thing for young people today to know about the crisis?
One, that it was kids. That's the most important thing, I think. Because when I see those kids from this point in my life, I just have so much admiration for them. I just think, oh, it's just so fascinated by them, so moved by them, so aware of their innocence, and that's how we all kind of have to be in order to be open. You know, we really do have to be open, and we really do have to be maybe young.
Energy helps.
Yeah. So that's why I think it's such a powerful model for social change, and such a powerful teaching tool. I mean, you know, it just, and I, you know, my joke that the chili should replace the George Washington icon because it's more current, and it could appeal to young person, or that we do need to give. We need to bring it up to date, folks, you know. I don't have to be the icon, but there are plenty of icons, and who aren't selling anything. So I think it's that. I think that's the significance, and that it just inspired. It just inspired so much.
You have any final thoughts?
No, I'm completely.
You're played out. All right.
Well, I mean, I know it was longer than you like, but.
No.
Oh, it all goes in, right?
There's no long, there's no
Oh,
short.
okay, I got it. I know what it's just the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay, we're done.
Thank you, Miss Trickey, and yes, Ms. Miller.
Screen fades to once again show the arrowhead of the National Park Service Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site with accompanying social media handles and logos.